let's jump right into this. We are diving into a deeply philosophical, almost graphic novel-style journey through an ancient myth. But listen, this isn't just some dusty old story. We're unpacking a fable that holds up a mirror to our very modern struggles with identity, burnout, and that creeping existential dread we all feel sometimes. We're looking at the descent of the seraph, a being of pure, unadulterated fervor, and seeing how its fall from grace maps perfectly onto the human experience of nihilism and our desperate search for purpose. To really get this, we have to plunge straight into the unmeasured wake of the very first dawn. Think about this for a second. To burn so close to the source of all existence is to exist on the knife edge of a profound philosophical paradox. That quote right there sets the exact stakes of our explainer today. We're not just talking about a creature. We're talking about what it literally means to exist at the absolute limit of reality. Right there, where finite form smashes into infinite being. Section 1, the furnace of pure zeal. Let's look at this absolute boundary. The entity's very name defines its kinetic, blazing purpose. The word seraph comes directly from the Hebrew root sarpaf, which literally means to burn, to consume, to reduce to ash. So this celestial guardian wasn't just sitting up there passively reflecting glory. No, it was a living furnace fueled entirely by the raw kinetic energy of divine holiness. Its entire existence was defined by burning, consuming zeal. And that burning zeal, it required a very specific form, a geometry of absolute surrender, utilizing 6 wings. In this original state, the act of flight was totally indistinguishable from the act of adoration. Its identity was entirely externalized, completely dissolved within the infinite echo of the Trisagion, that eternal, repetitive declaration of perfection. Because of this, there was absolutely zero room for existential dread. It didn't sit around worrying about who it was because it existed solely as a boundary marker, completely surrendered to its cosmic purpose. Moving on to Section 2, the paradox of proximity. Let's talk about cosmic friction. This brings us to a wildly fascinating paradox. The closer a created being is to absolute being, the more acutely it feels the void of its own inherent nothingness. This is the agonizing tension the seraph lived in. It's finite, yet it's tasked to bridge the infinite vacuum. Every single cry it made was an act of cosmic friction, an existential negotiation where it willingly let its own individuality be incinerated, just so only the deity's presence remained. It is the ultimate biblical philosophy of existence, finding your entire meaning by simply being a consuming mirror. Section 3, the inward fracture. Because that boundary between absolute holiness and total alienation, it's terrifyingly thin. Let's look at the quiet before the fall. Okay, so the crucial turning point here is a catastrophic shift in how it perceives itself. This entity, burning so unbelievably bright, suddenly looks inward. It recognizes its own brilliance and associates itself with the word Hallel, the morning star, the shining one. Now, this doesn't start as malice. It's actually a subtle yet totally deadly misinterpretation of its own nature. See, the entity possessed intense light, sure, but it was a reflected grace. The exact moment it misinterprets that light as its own intrinsic property, as something it actually owns, everything just breaks. The intense fire of adoration turns into this cold, dense gravity of self-awareness. It begins to objectify its own splendor, entirely apart from the source that provided it in the first place. Section 4, the ontological collapse. This is where the violent unraveling happens. The tragedy here is just profound. The creature starts contemplating its existence as a separate entity, an independent I am that's completely severed from the ultimate I am. And this ruptures the entire harmonious structure of the cosmos. The very wings that once shielded it in absolute surrender suddenly become heavy sails, catching the devastating wind of its own pride. This descent is the literal translation of being cast out from the heights of Zaphon, the sacred, divine mountain of assembly. We aren't just talking about moving from point A to point B here. It is a fundamental collapse of its very being. The entity plummets from a state of burning, unified purity straight into a fractured state of perpetual, unquenchable thirst. A literal plunge from light right into shadow. Try to imagine the raw sensory experience of this fall. The fire is violently stripped of its light, leaving only the dark, destructive heat of isolation behind. The entity doesn't just fall into some physical pit, it falls into the existential hell of its own memory.
It experiences this total deprivation of warming light, and it's replaced by the suffocating heat of being utterly alone. It is forever conscious of the incredible proximity to the infinite it once had, and the absolute terrifying void it actively chose to inhabit instead.
Section 5. Echoes in the Modern Void. Let's step out of the ancient myth for a second and talk about why this actually matters for us today. There is a profound mathematical weight to all of this. The capacity for supreme love carries the exact same weight as the capacity for supreme rebellion, meaning the highest spiritual heights harbor the deepest psychological abysses. The fallen entity retains its immense original nature, but directs it all toward a futile, eternal rivalry against the infinite. So, why does this matter to us? Well, because this perfectly mirrors our modern world. When we twist our own zeal into self-obsession and extreme individualism, when we start viewing our talents as things we own rather than shared gifts, it leads straight to existential burnout, crushing isolation, and this deep, unyielding nihilism. Which brings us to a pretty heavy question for all of us. Are we wandering stars? Seriously, think about our modern struggles with identity and purpose. When we completely separate ourselves from our core purpose, when we turn our gaze entirely inward and just obsess over our own splendor, don't we fall into the exact same trap of isolation? We all crave connection, for sure, yet we build these heavy sails of pride that just push us further into the dark heat of our own making. To wrap up the narrative arc of this fable, we have to look at the final state of this tragedy. When a being of pure fire loses its connection to the light, it does not simply go out. It becomes a wandering star, trapped forever in the blackness of its own self-made exile. The entity transforms from this beautiful boundary marker of light into a dark monument of nihilistic defiance. It's a pretty chilling reminder of what happens when we lose our connection to the things that truly fuel us. So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought today. What is the actual source of your light? When you look at your own life, your career, your relationships, are you mistaking a reflected grace for your own intrinsic fire? Take a little time to examine your own existential voids today. Ensure you aren't building those heavy sails of pride, but instead, you're staying connected to the true source of your purpose. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.